this is Mirtala, and this is Dr. Emily Goldmann, who is a social epidemiologist here at NYU College of Global Public Health. We're going to be chatting with her for a couple 20 to 30 minutes. And please send any questions you have throughout this feed. Send them in and we'll read them off. Invite your friends, colleagues, tune in, and let's begin.
Hi everyone, just to introduce myself again, I'm Dr. Goldman. I'm a clinical assistant professor in the Department of Epidemiology here at CGPH. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Yes.
And let us know if you can hear us.
Oh yes, very important. We're testing this out. So, Dr. Goldman, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood or growing up, where you grew up, what was school like?
Certainly. I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia. Should I talk to you or to them? To everybody. I'm going to talk to both of you.
Yes.
I grew up in the suburbs of Philadelphia, so not that far from here, and went to public school out there. Nothing very sort of interesting to talk about. I have an older sister and a younger brother. I was actually, a lot of people can't believe it anymore because I'm out of shape now, but I was an athlete in my day and played field hockey and lacrosse and was on the diving team before I came to New York City when I was 17 for college. And a fun fact is that I got my driver's license when I was 16 because I lived in the suburbs, but when I got to college I never drove again, so I haven't driven. I won't tell you how many years because then you'll know how old I am, but I haven't driven since I was 17.
What?
So, yes. So now I have to stay in New York City forever.
Okay, yeah, subway, that's faster here anyway.
Exactly.
So can you tell me a little bit about some of the books or podcasts that you're really into or maybe recommend? Absolutely.
So I have a lot of reading for work and for what I do in my public health life. But then I also am a really big fan of fiction as well. So I would say a few of my favorite authors, one that's someone that people are talking about a lot right now is Margaret Atwood because of the new TV show that's based on The Handmaid's Tale.
Oh, yes.
Right?
Yeah,
But one of my favorite books, I actually haven't read that one, which I will do, but one of my favorite books is called The Blind Assassin, which is one of her books as well. But I'm a big fan of Michael Chabon, who wrote The Adventures of Cavalier and Clay and the Yiddish Policemen's Union. It's one of my favorites. And
what's it about?
Well, they're both about different things, but the Yiddish Policemen's Union is about a settlement of Jewish settlement in Sitka, Alaska. It's sort of based on a revision of history, a fictional revision of history, where Jews involved in World War II in Europe were settled in Alaska. And it's about these two detectives sort of looking into an issue that's happened in that community. It's really fantastic. But one of the best books I've read in a long time is new. It's George Saunders' first novel called Lincoln in the Bardo, about Abraham Lincoln's son, who died very young while he was president.
Oh,
but
yeah.
from the perspective of these like ghosts in the graveyard, it's better than it sounds.
No, that actually sounds awesome.
Yeah, so I read a lot of fiction when I can, when I'm not grading and working and things like that. And then my favorite podcast is called Stuff You Should Know, and they always have a topic, so it'll be about dementia. And these two guys are very funny, and they tell you all the stuff that they researched about dementia. But it's very easy to understand. It's very geared to lay persons, and I learn a lot about stuff I don't know about. So dementia I know a little bit more about, but it'll be like stuff you should know, and it'll be about falcons or something random like that. So that's my favorite one.
Oh, okay. Awesome. That's that's kind of related to
Yeah, they actually have had one on PTSD and other mental health related topics, so I listen to make sure they've got it right.
You can correct.
Exactly.
So on that note, you were talking about the book about Lincoln and his son. If you could meet anybody, deceased or alive, or a couple of people, who would they be?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I am mildly obsessed, so I don't read a lot of poetry, so this is sort of random, but I do love this one poet, W.H. Auden. He was very active. He was he's British, but he was in Berlin in the 30s, and I think he actually married a Jewish woman to save her, to get her out of harm's way during World War II. But he's this amazing poet, and I would love to meet him. But I'm also slightly obsessed, maybe more than slightly obsessed with Barack Obama, and would love to meet him. I'm a big fan, and wish he were here with us as president forever. He's definitely somebody I would love to meet.
Oh. And jumping off that, now because of, I guess, this shift in administration, do you see any challenges or opportunities for public health practitioners, students?
Absolutely. Well, I think sometimes when things are going sort of well for a field like public health, and more money and attention is being put into it, and more money for research and for practice and for dealing like things with the opioid overdose epidemic, I think we get a little bit lazy. Everything's going okay, so we just stop pushing very hard. But in an administration like this, I think we're going to be constantly challenged. I think there was a lot of talk about NIH funding, and I think that's it didn't happen this round. Actually, they got a little more funding than, I read that they got a little more funding than was actually expected, but it's not out of the picture. Funding for CDC, which is particularly for public health practice, I think is in jeopardy, and very importantly, funding for global public health internationally is definitely in jeopardy. So I think we will face these struggles to be able to have the resources to continue the programs and research that we do, and particularly to support researchers in low and middle income countries, because a lot of that funding supports researchers there who can do research and practice in their own countries. But I think that it's an opportunity to get more involved. So it's a little bit scary, but I think it gets us going in terms of maybe we should actually do more than we're doing now to make sure we don't lose these things.
Right. Yeah. I mean, for sure. I'm completely right there with you.
Yeah.
And if you could do any other job other than what you're doing right now, what do you think that would be? Another world.
Totally. Well, I think when you get into a career, I love my job and my career. I did not come upon it. I came upon it, sort of stumbled upon it. So it wasn't like when I was 7, I wanted to be an epidemiologist. I didn't actually know what epidemiology was till I was 25. I mean, I really hadn't heard of it. But if for any of you who talk to me for more than 30 minutes, you will know that I'm a big animal lover, and I should have been a zoologist, probably. So if I could do anything else.
I see the parrot.
Exactly. And I haven't put them all up yet since we've moved, but there are more animal things around, and I have a bunch of pets. But I love snow leopards and red pandas. Those are my favorite animals. Red pandas. They're not at all like regular pandas, but they're called pandas. But they're like these little weasel type looking things. They're very cute. They're at the Central Park Zoo. There's 2 of them at the Central Park Zoo.
Check them out.
Yes, and there's 2 snow leopards at the Central Park Zoo. So it's like amazing, right there in the middle of the city, and both at the Bronx Zoo as well. But I would become a zoologist or an animal behavioralist if I could go back, which I won't.
What about in the past? Have you had any other jobs or other work experience aside from teaching? Yeah,
so I wasn't always in public health or teaching. I did not have what's considered a linear career path at all. I was an economics and Chinese language major in college, and instead of going into banking like everyone else in that major did and making hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Exactly. I went to sort of an economic consulting firm, and it was supposed to be, the idea was to use the economic skills and knowledge that I learned in an applied setting. And it really was, but it wasn't really the right job for me, and it was actually a 2-year job, and then the expectation was that you go and get an econ PhD or an MBA and come back higher. So it was really on a 2-year job, and then you have to leave. They kick you out after 2 years. And it was also in San Francisco, and having never visited San Francisco in my life, I decided I wanted to move to San Francisco after college, so I did. But it wasn't really the right job, and I was a little bit disillusioned with the field for no good reason. It was actually, in hindsight, it was just, there wasn't a lot of work going on because the bubble had just burst, the economic bubble of, this will tell you my age, of 2001. So there wasn't a lot of work, and luckily I didn't lose my job, but it was slow. So I decided that I love reading, which I told you about. So I went into book publishing, and I worked at Random House, the book publisher. I swear to God, I know, you just don't know what you want to do. And I wanted to move back to New York, and I said, I love books. I just want to do something that promotes books. So I didn't really have a lot of skills in other areas like editorial or publicity, but I was a quantitative person. So I went into book production.
What does that mean?
So in my mind, when I got the job, I thought I was going to be wearing like overalls, like cranking books out, and there's like ink all over my face. But actually, it was just faxing purchase orders. So you sort of plan, schedule, manage the production of each book. So sending it to the company that actually prints the books, prints the covers, binds the books, distributes the books.
Oh.
Yeah, it was less exciting than I thought it was going to be. So I was a production assistant at Random House, which is a great company. I probably only kept my job because Dan Brown at the time published the Da Vinci Code. And at first they only published a couple thousand copies because they didn't think anyone would buy it. But then millions of people bought it. Exactly. And I probably kept my job, just because they were making a lot of money at the time. So all my good friends were in book publishing. We had a great time. It was a nice, close-knit community, but I wasn't feeling very challenged in it and didn't really see myself challenging myself to move up. I didn't really see myself in my boss's position, which is what you should always ask yourself. Do I see myself as my boss or my supervisor? Because you don't want to stay where you are forever. So I looked at my boss and said, she's great, but I don't think I really want to do this. And so I applied for a PhD in economics, in economic development at the London School of Economics and got in. But then it was very expensive. There wasn't a lot of funding for non-EU, non-UK students. So I deferred while I tried to figure out my economic plan, and I was speaking with a professor from college, and he said, if you're so interested in economic development and health, which I said I was, why don't you just go to public health school? And I said, what's that? And I looked it up, and I ended up going to the University of Michigan, Master's in Public Health program, starting in policy, because I looked at the EPI major, and I thought, EPI's such a great fit for me. It's just like econometrics, but with health outcomes. It's just like what I was doing in econ. But I remember at Michigan there was a requirement of having a biology background. And I hadn't taken biology soon enough. I take a lot of math in college, but not as much science. That was high school. So I didn't think I'd get in. So I applied to policy, and I started there, did that for a year, and then took an EPI class, fell in love with it, met an amazing mentor, and switched. So did my master's in EPI and then my PhD in EPI there.
Do you think there was a moment or a time where you specifically remember this shift where public health is what I want to do, or was it more gradual?
So I think it was, when somebody had finally told me where my interests fit and put a name on it, which was public health, which I just didn't know was a field. So undergrads are so lucky now. So I teach undergrad EPI, and they're so lucky because there's so many undergraduate public health programs. But when I was going through school, and you can ask your other professors too, it just didn't exist. Maybe, I think there was one at Rochester, but it just didn't, I probably would have majored in it if I had known. So I think that was a big moment, just someone putting a label on where my interests were, which I didn't know what it was.
I didn't even know it existed, right? So it just all brought it.
It all brought it together. So that was the moment.
Oh.
And then for EPI, I remember there were different EPI tracks, EPI courses. EPI for EPI people and EPI for other people. Policy, health behavior, other tracks. And so I was in the other track one because I was in policy. And we're all studying together for our first exam. And I'm really enjoying it. I think it's great. And half the table is crying. And they really hate this. And they don't know what's going on. And they don't want to do it. And I was like, maybe this is for me. Because I was just really enjoying it so much. So I thought maybe that's the direction. And I spoke with a guest lecturer. The professor of that class is this amazing, amazing social epidemiologist. I couldn't end up meeting with her, so I met with someone else who had guest lectured, who's also a social epidemiologist. We really sort of hit it off intellectually, and I started working with him in my master's, switched over to EPI, and that's when it all took off.
And after that, that was when you were at that other job you mentioned at the beginning, right? After public health, or did you come straight into CGPH?
After my PhD.
Yes.
So I was in the economic consulting firm, then in Random House, then went back to school, then was in school for a long time because master's and PhD take a while.
Right.
But while I was working on my dissertation, before I was done, before I defended, my mentor and chair moved to Columbia to become the chair of the Epi department there.
Okay.
And asked me to come with him and work full-time research for him and finish my dissertation also. So Michigan was great, but I'm a New Yorker at heart, even though I'm actually from Philadelphia, but I feel like a New Yorker at heart. So I was like, there was no question, pack my bags, move back. And so worked with him for a year, working on my dissertation, and then I got a job, my dream job, the job I had always wanted in my master's and PhD, which was at the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene in adult mental health. As an epidemiologist, I got the job opened. So I went into it, but I hadn't defended yet. So 6 months into that job, I defended. So my first job really out after my public health training was at the Department of Health in New York City.
And how'd you end up here?
Oh,
With us.
Great, I know. So it was an amazing place to work. I had amazing supervisors, did really great work.
Yeah.
One of the projects I'm just the most proud of was a really quick and amazing, I think, assessment of psychological need after Sandy. That after Sandy hit, we put together really quickly and I think very well a population-based study to understand the prevalence of PTSD and other mental health issues after Sandy, because that was an area I'd focused on with my PhD mentor. And I put it together, we made a survey, I did all the sampling by myself. It was
sounds like a lot of work.
It was, but it was a great learning experience. We got it out in the field. The prevalence estimates looked right. I was really very proud of it. So it was in South Brooklyn and Staten Island because that was the most affected area. So, but that was a deviation. So I was working at the health department and I was asked by somebody in Epi at Hunter School of Public Health, which is not CUNY School of Public Health, to teach adjunct psychiatric epidemiology. So I started doing that and realized I really love teaching. So in my PhD, a lot of times you'll teach.
Right,
sort of how you make your salary, pay your tuition, unless someone covers you as a research assistant under their grant. And that's how I was funded my whole time. So I never TA'd. So I hadn't had that teaching experience to know whether I liked it or not. I'm a talker, as many of you know, so it made sense, but it's a slightly different animal. So I started adjunct teaching, realized I loved it, and then it actually didn't come straight here from there. I thought I'd try something else just really quickly to see, and I worked again at an economic consulting firm for a year, doing health economics outcomes research, which was a little more econ based, going back to my econ roots, but as an epidemiologist, and then said to myself, it's time. I miss academic research, I miss mental health research because the research there wasn't mental health focused per se, and I love teaching, so let's put it all together. I probably should have done academia in the first place, but I'm glad I have these other experiences, and then I ended up here.
Like you said, non-linear path.
Non-linear path. Yeah. My biggest piece of advice is to try different things because you never know what you're going to like and what you don't like. I thought some things were great fits for me and they weren't, and I tried it, ruled it out, and moved on. So that's my advice, but some other people will say just go. Just figure out what you want to do and go for it. Yeah. But I just think it's hard to know what you want to do.
For sure. I mean, I'm on that path right now.
Yeah, I mean, at many stages in your life. I mean, even now, in terms of thinking about what I'd like to research, there's so many areas that are interesting to me, and it's hard to decide, okay, I'm going to go this direction or this direction, so it's always a hard choice.
And really quickly, I just want to say hi to Edson Machumwa. Was that the person that emailed you earlier?
No.
Okay. He is, or she is, from, they want to study the certificate in public health, and they're from Zimbabwe.
Awesome.
So
that's
they're
fantastic.
So
thank you so much for being here. I hope it's not too late at night.
I have no idea what the time difference is.
Yeah. So I appreciate you turning in. The certificate program's amazing, and really, public health is such an amazing field. I wish I had known, again, I wish I'd known about it earlier. There are so many opportunities in public health that are very diverse.
Yes.
So you don't have to be an epidemiologist. A lot of people don't think it's as cool as I do, but there's so many other areas of policy and planning and health promotion that you can do, and it's such a growing field, and there's always going to be a public health need.
Yes.
So I think it's a career where there will be a lot of options.
I agree. I think it's very dynamic, which is amazing. I know for me, at least for my parents, are like, so what do you do? And there's so many different things you can do.
There are.
Like you explain, and even within just epidemiology, there's all
Absolutely.
these other different branches.
Absolutely. So people can be more academic research in epidemiology or practice. When I was at DOH, the way I practiced epidemiology was very different than what I do here. Here it's more about what is the etiology of disease and these big studies and more complicated analyses, a lot of the time writing papers, getting published, submitting grants. At the Department of Health, it's more about how can we support our programs and policies with evidence. So an epidemiologist are often, part of their job is to come up with that evidence, to create studies and locate evidence to, support the policies and programs. So it's a little bit different. The analyses weren't as complicated, but they had there was very specific intent behind them to really understand what was going on to help improve the population health of New York City.
And on New York City, what do you think are some of the what's public health like here in New York? What makes it similar or maybe different from other parts of the world?
I mean, I think that there are definitely specific public health issues that impact communities more so than others, right? That being distribution determines the disease, right?
Yes.
So I think New York may have public health priorities that are different from other parts of the world. So less of an issue with, say, TB, diarrheal disease, other infectious diseases that we see in other parts of the world. But most countries are going through what we call the epidemiologic transition, right? So this movement away from infectious disease being the greatest burden of disease towards more chronic disease.
Right.
And so we're all sort of in the same boat of issues with chronic disease. Obviously, mental health, that's what's closest to my heart, and I think it's the most important, but it's definitely not, but it's my priority. But other chronic diseases like cancer, cardiovascular disease, these are becoming the greatest burden of disease in New York City and everywhere else. The reason I think New York City is not that different is because it's so diverse. So you have people who are coming from such different areas with different perspectives, and those are the things you have to think about in global public health, about how context influences health, and culture influences health, and the acceptability of different treatments and interventions. You always have to think about those things, but you really have to think about it also in New York too. We're all Americans and New Yorkers, but it's such a diverse community that you have to be really innovative in order to reach all different parts of the city, because there are definitely people that are very marginalized in the city, and we really have to think about how to reach people, all New Yorkers. And so my view is that the best way to do this is to borrow what is being done in other countries and learn lessons there to bring back here. I think in public health sometimes people tend to say, okay, this works, we're going to adapt it in other settings, and that can work too, but we also have a lot to learn by what people are doing in other places. So an example just off the top of my head, that obviously it's going to be mental health related, is that I was just reading about these benches in Zimbabwe, actually. In Zimbabwe.
Hey, Zimbabwe,
yes,
shout out.
And they've trained community health workers, often older women, I think they call them like grandmothers, and they sit on benches, and they've been trained for a month in basic psychotherapy techniques and psychoeducation, some cognitive behavioral therapy, problem solving techniques and therapy, and people can just come and sit on the bench with these women and talk about their problems, and it's been found to be really effective. And this, to me, is number one, something that takes advantage of social cohesion. So I think in Zimbabwe there may be more social cohesion than we do in New York when everyone's just like doing their things, and we have I feel like there's less of a community here. I mean, I think there are specific communities, but overall everybody's just doing their own thing. But we can really take advantage of community, but also try to get interventions out there to reach more people where there are lacking resources. So it's such an innovative way to do this, where in a lot of places there are no psychiatrists or very few, or people with other specialized mental health training. And to train community health workers to do this, I think, is a way to combat that, but also to be more acceptable. Maybe you don't want to talk to a psychiatrist or a psychiatric nurse or a clinical psychologist, but you're willing to talk to this woman who reminds you a lot of your grandmother or your mother, and you might feel more open to doing so. And I think here in New York, we do have the tendency to just go to the psychiatrist, go to the doctor, get the medications, but that's not, again, we have a very diverse community here, and that may not be acceptable to everyone or accessible. You know, it's very hard to get mental health care in New York City. A lot of places, a lot of people don't take insurance, and there's huge copays. It's hard to find someone who's accepting patients. So I think bringing community health workers in is a great idea here as well. So it's just an example of how we could borrow something innovative and effective elsewhere and bring it here.
Yeah, I feel like there's always this whole like, oh, the U.S. needs to go and help this country and that country, but as you just mentioned in this example, there's a lot of things that we can also bring from outside that can help the U.S.
Absolutely.
It's not just the first world or developed countries that have to go and aid the developing ones.
Absolutely. And I think, I think we often think, well, this is a high resource setting, that's a low resource setting.
Yes.
But in high resource settings, there are people who have lower resources or less resources than others, can't afford different treatments or interventions. And so it's the same sort of concept. How can we be innovative and cost effective in distributing care? But also, another thing I didn't mention is we do have this diverse community, but we definitely don't have, in my opinion, enough diversity in our mental health clinicians or even our clinicians overall.
As far as? In
terms of diversity. So, you're coming to talk to your physician or a psychiatrist or a mental health clinician, and they don't speak your language. They're not from the same type of culture or the same country as you are. There's a lack of understanding about what you're going through, what you've been through, how family works and community, what you can, what you feel comfortable doing and saying and being involved in. And I think that disconnect can keep people away from seeking treatment. I think it's a big barrier to treatment. So finding ways to be more acceptable again, to increase treatment seeking is important too.
So what kind of student do you think would thrive at a place like CGPH, at a place like New York?
Well, New York is a fast-paced place. So New York isn't for everybody. Some people just don't really like all of the people and the energy going on. So you have to really want to be in an environment like this. But I think that's probably fewer people, the exception to the rule. New York is such an exciting and amazing place. Again, really diverse. There's so much going on, so many things to do, and so many sort of ways to see how public health works in a community. There's so much going on in New York City as well in terms of public health efforts that are really sort of leading in this country. But in terms of CGPH, I think it's the sort of drive and passion to want to improve population health. I mean, that's what we're all here for, is because we care deeply about improving population health, and really wanting to work with a diverse set of students and a diverse set of faculty. And we're really about global public health here. So the interest in practicing public health or being a researcher in public health in a global setting. But I want to be clear about what I mean by that. It doesn't mean you get your degree here and we expect you to go outside the country. That's not what I mean by global. Global is New York City too.
Exactly.
It's about considering the global context in terms of your in your public health practice. So I think it's a great place for people who want that in their public health training and then when they are public health practitioners.
And I just noticed that you have an award over there that you got this past month. She got an award for being basically the best professor this past year, or as voted by the students. And so really quickly want to shout her out for that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Awesome. And I was wondering if there's anything back there that is interesting painting? Any of those books? What do you have back there?
Well, let me show you. So I carry
Let's do
this
a
book
quick
around.
tour.
I carry this book around reading it. So I have some epi books in there and longitudinal data analysis if you're interested. My DSM-5, you have to have your DSM-5. That's the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. It's basically the Bible of mental disorders for clinicians and researchers. They'll take my class. It's super flawed, right? We weren't in the class.
Actually, I took her class. It's amazing. It was really a great class.
So we talk a lot about why it's good and what their sort of limitations to it. But I don't, you go into Dr. Ompad's office. She has a million books. I use the internets a lot more in terms of buying books, but this I was sort of holding up. But this is the book that's always sitting here that I'm always looking through, and everybody finds this really depressing. But this is Emil Durkheim's Suicide, a study in sociology. And this was really one of the first premier researchers of suicide. So I'm very interested in mental health, but one of my specific areas of interest is suicide and suicidal behavior. And so this is like the book everyone has to read, whoever is interested in suicide and suicide research, because this is really sort of the grandfather of suicide research. And he was a sociologist, so it really comes from a social perspective, thinking about why the etiology of suicide and suicidal behavior. So this is what I always have. And I actually had it here on my desk before, but I thought people find it depressing, so I put it away.
Maybe a little. What about that painting up there? I don't know if you guys can all see it. Maybe I can shift the camera a little bit so everybody can see it up there.
It's a watercolor. I believe it's from Nova Scotia.
Mm-hmm.
My mother got it for me, and it was sort of a gift for my office when I first got my job here, and I brought it with me from my last office. So it's my only artwork so far, though I do have, hang on.
We're taking a quick tour.
Yeah, I'm very excited. This is my painting from Accra, from Ghana. So I was very fortunate to be able to teach in the cross-continental MPH program.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Last fall, well, Myrtala was taking my course at the same time here. My co-instructor was teaching the first couple of lectures, and I was in Ghana teaching the same course there. So we'll go up eventually. We just moved. So yes. I'm looking for a place, if you guys have any suggestions, maybe over there. It was sadly tacked up with tacks in my last office, just ran away on the wall like this. So I'd like to put it somewhere nicer. So that's next, but and then of course, we have children's drawings. So I have two nieces who I love, Lily and Sylvie. Lily's almost 7 and Sylvie's gonna be 4 soon. And this says my name and says, I love you, Emily. And it was Lily who made this. So I have this in my office, so this will also go up.
Shout out.
So that's what's going on here. And then this strange parrot thing is a little bit of a joke. I don't know if you all know Professor Eric Roberts. He teaches undergrad biostat and is a very close friend of mine. We've known each other since the Masters in Michigan. And Lisa Croyne, our registrar, or our director of it, she made this for us because we're always together. So one is Emily, one is Eric. So that's what's going on right now.
I'm going to ask you 2 quick questions,
Sure.
like fun questions.
Yeah.
If you had a superpower, what would it be and why?
If I had a superpower, what would it be and why? My superpower, okay, I don't know if this is going to date me, but I played a lot of Super Mario Brothers 1 in Nintendo as a kid. I don't know if you guys remember that. It came with a gun for Duck Hunt, but my mother wouldn't let me use that because she thought guns promote violence, which they do. So we never played Duck Hunt, but I played a lot of Super Mario Brothers 1. And you can warp in it by going into these tunnels, and then you end up in a much farther level. And so I wish I could warp geographically because I love to travel, but I can't sleep on an airplane. So I am just done from the travel. So if I had a superpower, I would be able to basically warp to a very far location so I didn't have to travel by plane or car.
Oh, this actually leads perfectly into my next question.
Okay.
If you could travel anywhere, where would it be?
Okay, if I could travel anywhere, where would it be? So I've been very fortunate to do a lot of travel. I've been to some awesome places. So, and this year we're going to Spain and Portugal. So that's out. I think if I could go anywhere, this is sort of aspirational, right? Not something I could easily do myself. I think I would I think I'd like to go to like Peru and Chile and Patagonia, that area. I haven't been able to get there. That's a big trip. So I think that would be where I'd want to go. And then I could practice my terrible high school Spanish, like really bad high school Spanish.
And do you have any like hobbies, or what do you do outside for fun, outside of teaching?
Well, we always joke about that because I work most of the time, so I don't have a lot of hobbies. But I do crochet. I can make only things that are rectangular though, so I can't make anything with shape, but I can make rectangular crochet things like blankets, scarves, and pot holders, so I can always make you one of those. What else do and I read a lot as a hobby, obviously. And I guess one of the big things my partner and I do is he got me a fold-up bike for my birthday. It's like a Euro bike that folds up, so we ride bikes a lot. And
Fold-up bike.
I guess travel is a big hobby. We try to do a lot of that. And we go to a lot of museums. So I'm a member of a lot of museums in the city. I really like to go.
Okay. This is my final question, unless anybody else has another one.
Yes.
Every day when you wake up, what drives you to come into the office, to teach, to do public health? What is that, your drive? What's that passion? What motivates you?
I think, this doesn't make me unique in any way, but, human suffering is something that I think about a lot and is, just really sort of unacceptable. And I think that what drives me is to try to improve people's lives in any way I can. So whether it's through research, and the reason why mental health is so important to me is that, mental illness is so all-pervasive. There's really you can't just let's say you have a broken leg, you sit down, you're not walking on the leg, you don't really think about it. When you have mental illness, it affects every single part of your life and is such a huge burden on people. And I think what drives me is to try to contribute to understanding how we can reduce the burden of mental illness in different communities, but also, how I can improve my students' lives and make them good public health practitioners and get them excited about the field and, have a really good experience here. So I have been very fortunate that I've had amazing mentorship. So I have great mentorship here in our senior faculty. My mentor here is Bernadette Nobala, our interim chair of EPI. So I work in her lab group as well, and she's been an amazing mentor to me. My PhD mentor, Sandro Galea, he's the dean of BU's public health school now. I can't say how grateful I am to how much time and effort they put into me. And so my goal is to then do the same, because I had such a good experience. I was left in such a good place to build a career, and that's what I want to do well. So that's what sort of drives me in the morning. And also, it makes a difference when you like your job. So I have had jobs, I will not name which ones they are, but where, I'm dragging myself out of bed into work every day. And I don't have to do that here. I'm very excited to come in. I have amazing colleagues. I love you guys. I love the students. I love teaching. I love my research. So there's no do I have to go in or do I have to work? I work on the weekends, and sometimes I'm like, I wish I didn't have to do this much, but I really enjoy all parts of it. So that makes a big difference. So finding something that you're not dragging yourself out of bed for
sure.
is huge. And it takes a while. It really does. You will do a lot of jobs where you are dragging yourself out of bed, but finally you will find one. So I'm very lucky. Thank you.
Any last parting words before we end this live feed?
No, I guess one is just thank you for listening to me. I am a talker. I probably talked more and said more answers than Ritala was expecting me to. But I'm here.
Which I love.
I'm here. I'm always excited to meet all of the public health students. You don't have to just be interested in mental health or epidemiology for me to want to talk to you. So I'm always here to talk through what you're interested in and thinking about. I encourage you guys to take the classes that I teach. I teach Global Mental Health Seminar, which is really more geared to second year MPH students. I teach undergrad epi for any of you undergrads out there. And then I also teach a class called Data Utilization in Public Health Practice, which is online now. So for those of you who are interested in online classes, that really goes into the basics of using data to create evidence for public health practice. So for surveillance, policy, programming, and how do we use data? Where do we find it? How do we interpret it? How do we visualize it with tables and graphs and maps? So those are some classes that and I'm also teaching a SAS class in the spring. So I look forward to meeting all of you, and please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goldman.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you for tuning in.
Bye.
Share this video. Make it famous.